I stared at the only framed photo of our parents sitting on Vivian's mantel. The memorial gathering buzzed around me, but all I could see was Mom and Dad's smiling faces captured in that silver frame. My throat tightened as I approached my sister. "Vivian, could I maybe get a copy of that photo?" I asked quietly, hoping not to disturb the other guests. She turned toward me, her perfectly styled hair catching the light. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "They left it with me for a reason." Everyone heard it. The conversations around us stopped. Aunt Martha's teacup froze halfway to her lips. Uncle James cleared his throat awkwardly. I felt the blood drain from my face as 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. The room seemed to spin. I couldn't understand why she'd say something so cruel, so publicly. These were our parents. Our shared memories. Why was she acting like I didn't belong here? I forced a weak smile and stepped back, my hands trembling slightly. The humiliation burned in my chest, but the confusion hurt even more. Later that evening, I cornered Vivian in the kitchen while she arranged leftover casseroles. The guests had gone home, leaving behind the smell of funeral flowers and hushed conversations. "Why are you acting like this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't look up from the Tupperware containers. "Acting like what, Ella?" "Like I don't belong here. Like I'm not part of this family." Finally, she met my eyes. Her expression was cold, calculating. "You've always been the outsider, Ella. Maybe it's time you accept it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Outsider? What did she mean by that? We'd grown up in the same house, shared the same parents, the same childhood memories. "I don't understand," I stammered. Vivian's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Don't you?" She picked up a casserole dish and walked past me toward the refrigerator, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen with my heart racing and my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. The next morning, I found myself in Mom and Dad's basement, digging through dusty boxes of family photos. I needed to understand what Vivian meant. I needed to find some answers. Box after box revealed the same disturbing pattern. In family photos, I was either cut out completely or pushed to the far edge of the frame. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, family vacations, in every single photo, I was somehow separated from the main group. I held up a photo from my 8th birthday. There I was, standing 3 feet away from everyone else, looking like an afterthought. In another picture from a family camping trip, someone had literally scissored me out of the image. My hands shook as I sifted through more pictures. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. Someone had been systematically erasing me from our family history for years. But why? What had I done wrong? I was just a child in most of these photos. I couldn't have done anything to deserve this treatment. I sat back on my heels, staring at the evidence of my own erasure, feeling more confused and hurt than ever. At the post-memorial dinner, I sat quietly picking at my food when Aunt Rose slid into the chair next to me. She'd had a few glasses of wine, and her cheeks were flushed. She leaned close and whispered, "They tried to keep you a secret, but your mother loved you fiercely." My fork clattered to my plate. "What do you mean, keep me a secret?" Rose's eyes widened, as if she'd just realized what she'd said. She glanced around nervously, then back at me. "Oh honey, I thought you knew by now." "Knew what?" My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. She patted my hand awkwardly. "Maybe I've said too much. Maybe you should ask Vivian." Before I could press her further, she stood up abruptly and hurried away, leaving me with more questions than answers. Secret? What secret? And why would my own mother need to keep me a secret from anyone? I looked across the room at Vivian, who was laughing with some cousins. She seemed so comfortable, so at home. Meanwhile, I felt like I was drowning in mysteries I couldn't solve. 3 days later, I was packing up Dad's study when I found it, a sealed envelope tucked into the back of his old Bible. My name was written on the front in Mom's careful handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated just 6 months before the accident. "My dearest Ella, if you're reading this, then something has happened to your father and me. I pray you'll never need to see these words, but I can't take the chance. If anything happens to us, don't let them silence your place in this family. You belong here just as much as anyone else. You are loved, you are wanted, and you are mine. Don't let them erase you. All my love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. Don't let them erase you. Mom knew. She knew someone was trying to push me out, trying to make me disappear. But who was them? And why would anyone want to erase me from my own family? I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. Whatever was happening, Mom had wanted me to fight back. She'd wanted me to claim my place. A week later, I went to Vivian's house under the pretense of helping her sort through more of Mom and Dad's things. While she was in the kitchen making coffee, I slipped upstairs to her bedroom. I knew it was wrong, but I had to find answers. In her dresser, I found a locked drawer. I knew Vivian kept her jewelry box key in her bedside table, and I gambled that she used the same key for everything. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside was a photo album I'd never seen before. My breath caught in my throat as I flipped through the pages. There I was as a baby, as a toddler, as a young child. But in every single photo, I was with a man I didn't recognize. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile. He was holding me, playing with me, reading to me. The photos showed a relationship I didn't remember. This man clearly loved me, and I'd obviously been comfortable with him. But who was he? Why had these photos been hidden away? I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the album, locking the drawer again. But my mind was racing. Who was this mystery man, and why had he been erased from my memory? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the man in the photos. He appeared in every picture of my childhood, but never in any family gatherings. He was always alone with me, always focused entirely on me. I tried to remember him, but it was like trying to catch smoke. There were vague impressions, a deep voice singing lullabies, strong hands teaching me to tie my shoes, the smell of sawdust and fresh air. The next morning, I called my old friend Kelly, who'd grown up next door. If anyone would remember this man, it would be her. Kelly, this is going to sound strange, but do you remember a man who used to spend time with me when we were kids? Maybe someone who worked for my parents? There was a long pause. Ella, are you talking about Miguel? Miguel. The name sent a jolt through me. Yes, I think so. Who was he? He was your dad's gardener. But Ella, he was around all the time when you were little. He adored you. I always thought it was sweet how he'd take care of you while your parents were busy. What happened to him? He just disappeared one day. I think you were about 7 or 8. I remember you asking about him for months afterward. I couldn't get Miguel out of my mind. That night, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I ordered a DNA test online. But not just any DNA test. I also carefully collected some hair from Vivian's brush the next time I visited her house. 3 weeks later, the results came back. I sat in my car outside the post office, hands shaking as I opened the envelope. Probability of half-sibling relationship, 99.7%. Half-siblings. Not full siblings. We shared one parent, not 2. The DNA report unlocked additional genetic matches in their database. I scrolled through the names, not recognizing any of them. But then I saw it, a match for someone named Miguel Reyes, listed as a potential parent. Miguel Reyes. The gardener. The man in all those hidden photos. My world tilted sideways. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself, had been a lie. Vivian and I shared the same mother, but different fathers. And my father, my real father, had been the gardener. No wonder Vivian had always treated me like an outsider. In her mind, I was exactly that. I sat in my car for an hour, crying and trying to process this revelation. Then I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk at the records office was helpful but confused. "Your birth certificate has been amended?" she asked, squinting at her computer screen. "What does that mean?" "It means the original was changed at some point. Usually that happens with adoptions, but..." She scrolled through more screens. "This is unusual." The original father's name was Miguel Reyes, but it was changed to Robert Sullivan when you were about 2 years old. Robert Sullivan. The man I'd called Dad my entire life. The man who'd raised me, loved me, taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework. Is Miguel Reyes still alive? I asked. She couldn't give me that information, but she could provide me with his last known address. It was a care facility about an hour away. I drove there in a daze, my mind spinning with questions. Why had my birth certificate been changed? Had Dad adopted me? Did he know Miguel was my biological father? The care facility was clean and bright, filled with elderly residents in wheelchairs and walkers. I asked to speak with the administrator about Miguel Reyes. He's in room 14, she said gently. But I should warn you, he has dementia. He has good days and bad days. Miguel Reyes was sitting by the window in room 14, staring out at the garden. He was older now, his hair white and his hands shaky, but I recognized him immediately from the photos. Excuse me, I said softly, stepping into the room. Miguel? He turned toward me, his eyes unfocused at first. Then something shifted in his expression. His entire face changed, becoming younger somehow. Mariella, he whispered. My beautiful Mariella? Mariella. My mother's name. He thought I was her. I sat down beside him, my heart breaking. No, Miguel. I'm Ella. Mariella's daughter. He studied my face for a long moment. Then his eyes filled with tears. Ella, he breathed. My little flower. You came back. I'm sorry I've been gone so long, I said, not knowing what else to say. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched my cheek. I never forgot you. Even when they said I had to stay away, I never forgot my little flower. They made him stay away. Someone had deliberately separated us. Who made you stay away, Miguel? But his eyes had already gone distant again. The moment of clarity was over. He was lost in the fog of his disease once more. Armed with everything I'd learned, I drove straight to Vivian's house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't knock. I used the spare key I knew she kept under the flower pot and walked right in. She was in the living room, watching TV with a glass of wine. When she saw me, she nearly spilled it. Ella. What are you doing here? I know about Miguel, I said simply. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. I know he's my father. I know you and I are half-sisters. I know Mom had an affair with the gardener. Vivian stood up abruptly, wine sloshing over the rim of her glass. You were never supposed to find out. She cheated. He was nothing but the gardener. All her composure cracked. Years of resentment came pouring out like water through a broken dam. Do you know what it was like? She screamed. Watching her fuss over you, the product of her affair? Watching Dad pretend you were his when everyone knew the truth? I was his real daughter, but you were her favorite. I didn't know, I whispered. Of course she didn't know. We made sure of that. We sent him away when you were 7. We changed your birth certificate. We did everything we could to erase that mistake. The next day, I called the family lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He'd handled my parents' estate, and I needed to understand something. Mr. Henderson, I need to ask you about the will. Specifically, about the clause regarding the house. Ah yes, he said. Your parents were very specific about that. The house cannot be sold unless both daughters agree to the sale. It was important to them that you both had a say. Both daughters, I repeated. So I do have legal rights to the house? Absolutely. Equal rights, in fact. The will makes no distinction between you and Vivian. I felt a surge of something I couldn't quite name. Power? Vindication? And if one daughter wanted to live in the house and the other didn't? Well, there are several options. The daughter who wants to live there could buy out the other's share, or they could work out some other arrangement. But both parties would have to agree. I thanked him and hung up. Vivian thought the family estate was entirely hers. She'd been living in the house since our parents died, making all the decisions, acting like she owned it outright. But she didn't. The house was half mine, and she couldn't do anything with it without my permission. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I smiled. 2 days later, Vivian called me. Her voice was different, smaller, less confident than usual. Ella, we need to talk. Can you come over? When I arrived, she was pacing in the living room. She'd obviously been crying. Look, she said without preamble, I know things have been complicated. But we're still family. We can work this out. Can we? I'll give you $10,000. Cash. You sign over your rights to the house, and we can both move on with our lives. I stared at her. You want to buy me out for $10,000? It's a generous offer, Ella. More than generous. The house is worth at least $400,000. Half of that would be $200,000. Her face flushed. You're not entitled to half. You're not even Dad's real daughter. But I am Mom's real daughter. And according to the will, that's all that matters. She sank into a chair, her composure cracking again. What do you want? I don't want your money, Vivian. I want the truth. I want to know why you spent my entire life making me feel like I didn't belong. Because you didn't belong, she snapped. You were a reminder of her betrayal, of her weakness. Every time I looked at you, I saw what she'd done to our family. 3 days later, Aunt Lydia called me. She was Mom's youngest sister, and she'd always been kind to me. Ella, honey, I heard about what happened with Vivian. I think it's time you knew the whole truth. She came over that evening, carrying a small box of letters and photos. Your mother loved you so much, she said, settling onto my couch. When she found out she was pregnant, she was terrified. She'd made a mistake, but she couldn't bring herself to regret it because it gave her you. What about Dad? Robert, I mean. He was devastated at first. But when you were born, he fell in love with you immediately. He wanted to raise you as his own, to give you his name and his love. He was a good man, Ella. He chose to be your father. Then why did Vivian hate me so much? Lydia sighed. Because she was just a child herself when all this happened. She was only 5 when you were born, and she didn't understand. All she knew was that suddenly there was this new baby, and everyone was walking on eggshells around the situation. But why did they send Miguel away? Your mother begged your father not to cut you out of Miguel's life completely. She knew you loved him, and he loved you. But Vivian convinced Robert it was best for everyone if Miguel just disappeared. For the family's image, she said. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I hacked into Vivian's iCloud account. I knew her password because she'd used the same one for everything since we were teenagers, our childhood dog's name plus her birth year. What I found made my blood run cold. Voice recordings. Dozens of them, dating back several years. Arguments between Vivian and Dad, recorded without his knowledge. I clicked on one from 2 years ago. Dad, you need to think about this practically. If something happens to you and Mom, do you really want Ella to have any claim to the house? She's not even your real daughter. Vivian, I've told you before. I know what you've told me. But legally, practically, she has no right to any of this. I'm your only real child. I should inherit everything. That's not how your mother and I see it. Then maybe you need to change how you see it. For all our sakes. I listened to recording after recording, each one showing how Vivian had slowly, methodically manipulated our father into questioning my place in the family. But the worst part was that in the end, it hadn't worked. The will still protected me. Which meant Vivian had been planning for years to simply ignore my legal rights and take everything anyway. The next morning, I called Mr. Henderson again. I have some recordings I think you need to hear, I said. An hour later, I sat in his office, watching his face grow more serious with each recording. This is disturbing, he said finally. These recordings show a clear pattern of manipulation and coercion. What does it mean legally? It means we need to reopen the trust. If your sister was pressuring your father to change the will, and if there's evidence of that pressure, it changes everything. Changes it how? Well, for one thing, it strengthens your position significantly. Your parents' original intentions were clear, they wanted you to have equal rights. If Vivian was trying to undermine that through manipulation, the court would take a very dim view of her actions. He leaned back in his chair. Ella, I need to ask you something. What do you want to happen here? I want what's fair. I want my parents' wishes to be respected. And I want Vivian to understand that she can't just erase me from this family. Then we'll need to file a motion to reopen the estate. That changes everything. Within a week, word had spread through our extended family about the legal proceedings. Mr. Henderson had filed the motion to reopen the estate, and suddenly everyone was talking about it. I started getting phone calls from cousins I barely knew, asking what was happening. Some were supportive, others seemed to think I was being greedy. But the worst part was what happened to Vivian. At family gatherings, people started giving her cold shoulders. There were whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Someone had leaked the story of the recordings, and suddenly everyone knew what she'd been doing behind the scenes. I saw her at the grocery store one day, and she looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled. She'd lost weight. For a moment, I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered all the years of being made to feel like I didn't belong, all the photos I'd been cut out of, all the times she'd made me feel small and unwanted. She'd created this situation. She'd chosen to manipulate and scheme instead of simply accepting me as her sister. Now she was facing the consequences of those choices. The biggest shock came when Vivian's own husband, David, called me. Ella, I need to see you. Can we meet somewhere private? We met at a coffee shop downtown. David looked exhausted, older than his 45 years. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. I've suspected for years that something was wrong with how Vivian treated you, but I didn't want to get involved in family drama. It's okay, David. You didn't know. But I did know. Or at least, I suspected. And I should have said something sooner. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I found this in our bedroom. She'd hidden it behind a dresser drawer. I think it's meant for you. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was another letter from Mom, dated just a week before the accident. My darling Ella, I know Vivian struggles with your place in our family. I pray that someday she'll understand that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. You are not less than her, and she is not less than you. You are both my daughters, and I love you both completely. If anything happens to me, please know that your father and I want you to be taken care of. We want you to have a home and a family and a future. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Love always, Mom. David's revelation led me to the attic above Vivian's garage, where he said there might be more hidden items. Using a flashlight, I found an old camcorder tucked behind some Christmas decorations. The battery was dead, but I took it home and charged it. When I finally got it working, I discovered hours of family footage I'd never seen before. But it was the last video that broke my heart. It was from my 6th birthday, filmed by Dad. I was sitting at the kitchen table, blowing out candles on a homemade cake. The camera turned to Mom, who was standing in the doorway watching me with tears in her eyes. She looked directly into the camera and said, "No matter what anyone ever says about how she came to be part of our family, she's my daughter. I love her with all my heart." Then the camera panned to show Miguel in the background, smiling proudly as he watched me make my birthday wish. The video ended with Mom picking me up and spinning me around while I giggled. In the background, I could hear Dad's voice saying, "That's my girl." I sat in my living room, crying as I watched the video over and over. Here was proof that I had been loved, that I had been wanted, that I had belonged. They had all tried to erase these memories, but they couldn't erase the truth. A week later, I set up a family Zoom call. I invited everyone, Vivian, David, all our cousins, aunts, and uncles. I told them I had something important to share about Mom and Dad's estate. 23 people logged in, their faces filling my computer screen. Vivian looked nervous, David looked resigned, and everyone else looked curious. I wanted to share some things I've discovered about our family, I began. Things that I think everyone should know. I started with the DNA test results, explaining that Vivian and I were half-sisters. I could see the shock on people's faces, the whispered conversations that were happening off camera. Then I played selected portions of the recordings, showing how Vivian had manipulated Dad. People's expressions grew darker as they listened. Finally, I showed them the videos, the proof of how much Mom and Dad had loved me, how much they'd wanted me to be part of the family. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Cousin Margaret spoke up, "Wait, if the DNA test shows Miguel is your father, and the will says the house belongs to both daughters equally, doesn't that make you the primary heir to your mother's estate?" I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. Vivian was Dad's biological daughter, but I was Mom's biological daughter. In the eyes of the law, we were equal heirs. But morally, emotionally, I was the one who'd been lied to, manipulated, and pushed aside. With Mr. Henderson's help and armed with all the evidence I'd gathered, I petitioned the court to restructure the will. The judge reviewed the recordings, the DNA evidence, and the testimony from family members. 3 months later, I received the court's decision. The estate would be redistributed according to the parents' original intentions, with protections in place to prevent future manipulation. Half of everything was now legally, officially mine, including the house that Vivian had been living in for the past 2 years. But more importantly, the court had ordered that all family records be corrected to reflect the true circumstances of my parentage. No more lies, no more hidden truths. I was finally, legally, officially recognized as an equal member of the family. The day the decision came down, I drove to Miguel's care facility and sat with him in the garden. He was having one of his clearer days, and when I told him about the court ruling, he smiled. "You fought for your place," he said softly. "Your mother would be proud." "She left me letters," I told him. "She told me not to let them erase me." He nodded. "Smart woman, your mother. She knew you were strong enough to stand up for yourself." I didn't kick Vivian out of the house immediately. Instead, I sent her an official eviction notice with a 90-day grace period. It was more than she'd ever given me, but I wanted to be fair. She called me, screaming, the moment she received the notice. "You're heartless," she shouted into the phone. "This is my home. I've lived here for 2 years. And before that, it was my home for 18 years, I replied calmly. "The house belongs to both of us, but you've been living in it rent-free while trying to steal my inheritance. That ends now. I'll fight this in court." "With what evidence?" "You recorded yourself manipulating Dad. You have no legal ground to stand on." There was a long pause. Then, in a smaller voice, "Where am I supposed to go?" "You'll figure it out. You're a smart woman, Vivian. You figured out how to manipulate Dad for years. I'm sure you can figure out how to rent an apartment. I can't believe you're doing this to me." "I'm not doing this to you. I'm finally done being silent while you do things to me." I hung up the phone, feeling lighter than I had in months. A week later, I received a package in the mail. Inside was the original family photo from Vivian's mantle, professionally restored and printed in a large format that showed details I'd never noticed before. There was also a note in my own handwriting. I made my own copy. "You can keep the fake life." I'd had the photo restored and reprinted, but I'd also done something else. I digitally added Miguel to the image, placing him where he should have been all along, standing beside Mom, with his hand on my shoulder. It wasn't historically accurate, but it was emotionally true. He should have been in our family photos. He should have been acknowledged as my father. I sent the restored photo to Vivian with a simple note: "This is what our family actually looked like. No more lies, no more erasures." I kept the original for myself, but I also had copies made for Miguel, for Aunt Lydia, and for anyone else who wanted to remember Mom and Dad honestly. The truth was finally visible, finally acknowledged, finally preserved. 2 days later, Vivian called me. She was crying. "Ella, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I was wrong, I was cruel, I don't know what I was thinking." I listened to her sob for several minutes before responding. "I know you're sorry now, Vivian. But you weren't sorry when you were cutting me out of photos. You weren't sorry when you were manipulating Dad. You weren't sorry when you refused to share that photo with me at the memorial service. I was jealous, she whispered. I was scared that if people knew the truth, they'd love you more than me. So you decided to make sure I never had the chance to be loved at all. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, can't we work this out? Can't we be sisters again? I thought about it for a long moment. Forgiveness doesn't mean I forget, Vivian. I deserved the truth from the start. I deserved to know who my father was. I deserved to have my place in this family acknowledged and protected. I know. I know you did. Maybe someday we can rebuild our relationship. But it will be built on honesty this time, not lies. I hung up the phone and looked around my new apartment. It was smaller than the family house, but it was mine. I'd chosen it, decorated it, made it into a home that reflected who I really was. I finished hanging the last picture on my living room wall. There was the restored family photo, showing all of us together as we should have been. There was a picture of Miguel and me from when I was 5, both of us grinning at the camera. There was Mom's letter, framed and displayed prominently. But the centerpiece was something I'd written myself, a letter to my future self, mounted in an elegant frame. Dear future Ella, never forget that you fought for your place in this family. Never forget that you refused to be erased. Never forget that you are loved, you are wanted, and you belong. They tried to silence your story, but you made sure the world heard it instead. You are Miguel's daughter. You are Mariella's daughter. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. With love and pride, present Ella. Below that, I'd written one final line, they tried to erase me. I made sure the world remembers me instead. I stepped back and looked at my wall of truth. Every photo, every letter, every document told the story of who I really was and where I really came from. No more lies. No more erasures. No more silence. I was finally, completely, myself.